Do you like Dungeons and Dragons? Sure you do. It's probably part of why you clicked on this video. And if you're like me, you're bad at it. Really bad. Like, yeah. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. What we're here to talk about today is minis. Because if you are like me, then you at least have a lot of fun making your characters. So much fun that your DM questions your general ability to make decisions and carry out straightforward logical thoughts. Those characters are usually some of the most fun. Unfortunately, not everybody has a mini that suits their taste. Now, you can go out to places like Heroes Forge and whatnot and pay for some, but at the end of the day, they still feel pre-built and don't fit what you want. So today, I'm going to show you how to make your own little abomination. The idea for this project came up during our last session, where I created a half-orc fighter. Now, I wanted to see how weird I could get with the other half, so I chose to make him a gnome half-orc. He's about 3 feet tall, 3 feet wide, nothing but rage and power. Now, this first build I unfortunately didn't have any footage of, but I chose to make him out of JB weld, which was terrible. It took forever to dry, it was hard to work with, but you could throw him at a brick wall and only damage the brick. But today I'm going to show you something a little bit easier to work with and hopefully lead you to make something of your own. For this project we'll be working with polymer clay, so I built a small wire frame and set it up on a base that would survive the baking. Now the rock was a little overkill, but it worked out for what I wanted in the end. To get this going, I took some clay, rolled it out into some thin strips, and just started attaching it to the frame and bulking the body out. I originally used super glue to attach it to the frame. I don't know if this was the best idea, but it worked out for me in the end. Once I had most of the body shaped into a little flesh golem, I went ahead and baked it to give myself a solid base to build off of. I took my die grinder and started cutting back some areas that just were a little extra bulky in the wrong places, and started to refine most of the muscle mass. Once I got most of the body shaped out, I took some bacon bond and started filling in some areas that needed a little more bulk to emphasize his strength and mass. Now, if you're wondering what kind of character would he be making with this much mass and a tail, it's a Dragonborn. It's gotta be a Dragonborn. Definitely has to be a Dragonborn. You'd definitely be wrong. I wanted to play with a Tiefling because I thought they looked cool, but they're intelligence characters, and I'm not an intelligent player. So I made a Tiefling Barbarian who basically sounded like Kronk and had more strength than he knew what to do with. And with most of the body bulked out, he was ready to break down some doors and terrorize, well, most anyone. Now, I really love this grinder attachment. It's smaller than a ballpoint pen and really lets me get into some areas for fine detail work. Suddenly, a random sword appeared, only because I forgot to record the making of it. Pretty simple though, just took a paper clip, mashed it in some clay, cut out a simple sword design. Once I got Tadpole Hulk built up, it was time to start making him some clothes. Now it's a barbarian, so it's pretty simple, leather pelt around the waist, boots, few items here and there, not too much. I just rolled out some thin strips, started cutting them out, shaping them, and fitting them to the body. One, two, three, and fourth time. Yeah, small details are hard to work with. Now, I thought doing this on Annabelle was bad, but lacing a belt on this little guy, along with a shoulder strap, an absolute nightmare. And don't even get me started on the boots. After working on him for a while, I felt his design was a little bit lacking. So after making a fur paladin, I decided to add a pouch to his left leg. I cut out a thin strip, wrapped around his leg, bulked out a tiny piece to build a pouch. I eventually moved on to some arm straps as well as a guard for his left arm. I decided now was a good time to start filling out some details on the body. I wanted him to have long flowing strands of hair, so I decided to fill that out before I put his horns on. Just cutting some thin strips out and using some bacon bond to apply them directly to the head. while I let that set, I decided it was time to start working on his hands. I worked here on the left, shaping it to form essentially a baseball mitt. I wanted him to be holding a ball of lightning in the original concept I had, but I wasn't skilled enough to make that work. So instead, I just formed the base of it and cut in the details for the fingers. And now it was time to build his horns. After rolling out a very thin strand, I applied some bacon bond to his brow. Once I had all of that in place, I took the thin strand and started working it in, forming it like a horseshoe till it had the shapes I wanted and working it into his brow structure. Once all that was done, I could permanently add his sword. I figured out the position I wanted it to be in, got everything lined up, and then took some super glue to attach the paperclip to the rest of the structure, eventually building up the hand around it. And with some final detail work, there is our little giant Tiefling boy in his raw clay form. Now, I'm super thrilled with how this turned out. While it's not my first small sculpture, it's definitely my proudest, and hopefully the paint will do him some justice. And with that said, let's get started. Now, I didn't want him to be too bright and colorful, so I mixed in some dull tones, some browns and grays, to create a dull red for his body color. Once the base had dried, I went ahead and painted his hair, using some white that I eventually toned down with some grays and washes. Then it was time for the clothes. I used some light browns to fill in the pelt around his waist, as well as some dark brown for the straps, boots, and a little dry brushing on the pelt. And now for the tedious bits. I came in with some flat black to fill in most of his eyes as well as detail the shape of his mouth. I then came in with a color shift yellow to give him a very vibrant pupil in each eye. After that, I coated each horn in an absolutely gorgeous color shift black. Afterwards, it was on to the bronze, which we used to detail his tail cuffs, as well as color the buckle on his belt, his boot buttons, and the hilt on the sword. An even coat of brilliant silver finishes off the sword nicely. Given my history in Dungeons & Dragons, I knew he would probably need a few runes or protective tattoos to raise his AC. So using some toned down white, I went ahead and added a few to his body just for aesthetics. Since I used a rock as his base, I decided to use some leftover grass flocking and shrub bits to create a realistic looking terrain for him to be standing on, using Mod Podge to tie all the bits together. And that about wraps us up. So let's move on to those final shots. If you're still watching, thanks for making it this far. This was a lot of fun to do, and really added a lot to our games. Now, he is quite huge, as you can see with him beside the gnome orc and a standard tiefling, and he is far from perfect, but he is 100% the character I envisioned. And if you want to make one for your next game, go for it. It doesn't have to be amazing, it doesn't even have to be remotely close. It just has to be yours. That's what makes art fun. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and subscribe to see more creations in the future. Also, do forgive the audio, I just moved into a very echoey room and hope to fix it soon. But, until next time, we'll see you guys.